Hello and welcome to my channel and to this video, which is the second in my series of paintings inspired by a recent trip to Scotland. Myself and my friend went on holiday recently. Well, I say recently, it was about 2 months ago now. We went for 2 weeks and we tried to see as much of Scotland as we could in what was a relatively short space of time. So it involved a lot of travelling and visiting a few different islands along the way. And it was pretty incredible. In terms of the views that we saw, I was so inspired to paint. I do talk about this a little bit more in the first video of this series, which is about the first stop on our trip in Stirling. So if you want to watch that first, that's already available to see. So this video is picking up where we left off. So from Stirling, me and my friend headed north towards Inverness, which was our next stop on the list. But we decided to break the journey up just so we didn't have to do too much driving in the same day. And it was at that nature reserve that we saw the thing that inspired this painting. Before we go any further, I just want to apologise for how much my hand is covering the painting. I have obviously got no spatial awareness and I didn't realise I was doing this until I watched this video back. It does get better as we go through, but sorry that the biggest thing you can see in this painting is my hand. I will try and improve for next time. In the last video, I talked a little bit about how I didn't want this series to be all the same. I like variety, so the last video was a small landscape on copper, and I do want to do more of those, but this time we're painting a bird. And this isn't actually from my own photo, because the bird that we saw was too quick, and I only take my phone with me on these trips, so I didn't get a good picture of it, but I did manage to find a royalty-free photo that I could use, because when I was trying to think about what stood out from this portion of our journey, this bird was it, and I thought this would make a really nice painting. By the time we reached the nature reserve, which is Loch Garten, we were pretty tired because the journey took way longer than we thought it would. We were travelling on a bank holiday, which was maybe not the best idea, but it was the only time we could get there. We timed the trip really well in terms of weather, but not for the bank holiday. It was so busy. There was an event going on at the same time somewhere nearby, and so the roads were super full. We just weren't moving anywhere. We ended up taking a really long detour on all of these narrow side streets and back roads until we eventually got here. So the first thing we wanted to do was just have tea and eat something and not do very much, just stretch our legs from being stuck in the car, which is what we did. And I had a very lovely flapjack. I think it was banana and cinnamon. I'm not entirely sure, but whatever it was very nice. So with that ticked off the list, it was time to actually see the place. The loch was beautiful, but one of my favourite bits of this was actually the woodland, because you could see all of this dapple light, which I thought would make a really nice painting. And we were surrounded by birds. Everywhere you went, there was so much activity going on. It was really, really lovely. There were a few things that we wanted to try and see. I'd really love to see a red squirrel, and unfortunately we weren't successful this time, but this little bird was another one on the list, and we spent ages trying to look for it. There were a few feeders near the visitor centre and then some just a little bit further out, so we kept moving between them to have a look. And we saw pretty much everything else. We were surrounded by different woodland birds. There was a lovely great spotted woodpecker, which was really nice, and we saw a goldcrest and lots of blue tits and great tits and long-tailed tits, and we were completely surrounded by chaffinches. I don't think I've ever seen as many chaffinches as I saw on that day. They were all over the place. I think the young must have just left the nest, and so we were absolutely surrounded by them, and every time we thought this bird had arrived and it had landed nearby, it was another chaffinch. This bird was really elusive, and I was thinking that we probably wouldn't see it. We went back to the visitor centre, and there was a member of staff there who asked if we had been looking at it, and we said we'd been trying but we hadn't seen it yet, and he pointed out that it had been pretty much right in front of us. And I had not noticed, because there were bird feeders all over the place and we were surrounded by birds, so we were kind of in the right location but we were looking in the wrong direction, and if he hadn't have pointed it out, then I am not sure that we would have noticed it at all. So we hung around for a little longer and we waited in the same place, and it came back and we got to see it twice. The first time, I feel like it doesn't really count because it was so fast. If someone hadn't pointed out that it was there, I would not have seen it, and I wouldn't have even known what it was. It was just a blur. But the second time it came, it sat on the feeder and I could see its silhouette and I could see the crest on its head, and so I knew what it was. And if you haven't figured it out yet, or you've not heard of this bird before, this is a crested tit. These tiny little birds live in certain parts of Scotland. They like Scots pine forests, and I don't live in Scotland, so I have never seen one before. So it was really nice getting the chance to see this on our trip up to the north of Scotland. I definitely have a soft spot for birds. I've always loved wildlife ever since being little, and what that usually involved was me watching loads of nature programs and wanting to go to Africa on safari. But noticing the birds in the garden is what made me realise that there's wildlife here, like on our doorstep, and that I don't need to go somewhere exotic to find lovely wildlife. And that realisation has had a pretty big impact, because I ended up working in conservation for a little while. I spend a lot of my spare time searching for butterflies or going to nice places like Scotland to see all of the wildlife that they have. And it also affects the kind of things I like to paint, because I love to paint wildlife and landscapes, especially places that I've seen or animals that I've come across. So seeing those garden birds and trying to figure out what they were when I was really little has had a huge impact on what I've chosen to do since then. So yeah, I definitely have a soft spot for birds. Anyway, after we saw this little guy, we decided that it was probably time to get back on the road, and so we got back in the car and drove up to Inverness, where we were stopping for the night before heading on to the next part of our journey. We didn't get to see much of Inverness. It was more of a stopover point on the way to the next location, but we did spend a little bit of time at Channery Point, which isn't too far, where we were attempting to see dolphins. We were unsuccessful in our attempt to see dolphins. It was very chilly. We went wrapped up and we stood there for what seemed like a really long time, and we really put a lot of effort in, but there were no dolphins, unfortunately. The sea was pretty rough, so I guess even if they had been there, it would have been pretty difficult to see them. We got to see gannets, which was great, and there were also some really friendly gulls that I think were probably just friendly because they thought we had food to share. But they were really nice to see, and I think one of my favourite bits was the lighting towards the end of the trip there, because the sun was starting to set and it just looked really beautiful across the sea. So that could potentially be another painting in the future. There are just so many options for paintings from this trip. But anyway, I've finished rambling and I finished this video. So I hope you enjoyed watching this and learning about this trip to Scotland. Please let me know what you think in the comments. I will be back again with another video of the next part of our holiday.